My wife told her friend I don't cook at home, but I brought dinner every day for 8 years, so I stopped cooking for her, and now she's begging for forgiveness. I'm 35 years old. I work as a cook at a mid-level Italian restaurant downtown, and I need to tell this story because what happened a few weeks ago almost destroyed my marriage over something I thought was completely normal and appreciated in my house. The thing is, I've been like 8 years since my son Benjamin was born, bringing dinner home every day after work, and I never thought that could become a problem or a reason for mockery. I guess I should start from the beginning so it makes sense. I met Jessica when we were both 24. I had just started as a kitchen assistant at the restaurant where I'm now one of the main cooks, and she worked at an accounting office. We got married 2 years later, and at first everything was different. It was just the two of us. We'd go out to eat or cook together on weekends, nothing very structured. But when Benjamin was born, everything changed, obviously, because a baby completely reorganizes your life and you need routines that work. Jessica decided to stay home the first few years with Benjamin, and then when Charlotte was born, our daughter, who's now 6, she kept doing that for a couple more years before going back to work part-time. During that whole period, we developed a dynamic that, honestly, I thought worked perfectly for everyone. Jessica handled breakfast and lunch during the week because I left very early for the restaurant, like 6:30 in the morning for prep, and she was home with the kids. I, for my part, brought dinner home every night when I got off work, around 8:30. It wasn't anything fancy. I mean, I worked at a restaurant where the food was good and the chef let us take things home. So I'd just prepare extra portions of whatever we were making that day and pack them up for my family. This became our routine for years, literally years, and we never questioned it. The kids expected the dinner that Dad brought. Jessica could relax in the evenings after a long day with them, when they were little, or after her work when she went back to the office. And I felt like I was contributing in a meaningful way. On weekends, we'd cook together sometimes, or go out to eat, or order pizza, whatever. But during the week, it was my thing, my contribution. You know what I mean? I worked long shifts, sometimes 12 hours or more depending on the day, but I always brought that dinner home because it was important to me that my family ate well and that Jessica didn't have to worry about preparing 3 meals a day. All of this worked perfectly fine until like a month ago. It was a Friday night. I had gotten home with primavera pasta for the kids and a mushroom risotto with chicken for Jessica and me, which is one of her favorite dishes on the menu. The kids were already in their pajamas watching a movie. And when I came in, Jessica told me that her friend Stacy was coming over in an hour for a girls' night. Wine, gossip, that kind of thing they do every so often. Perfect. No problem. I'd take the kids upstairs after dinner so they could have the living room to themselves. We all ate dinner together, the kids went to bed, and Stacy arrived around 9:30 with a bottle of wine and that energy she has, like very outgoing and direct. Stacy has been divorced for like 3 years, from a guy who, according to her, was super lazy and didn't do anything around the house. And since then, she's like very vocal about the topic of men needing to contribute equally and all that, which is fine. I mean, I agree with her in principle. I was upstairs with the kids, but I could hear everything because our house isn't very big and sound travels easily between floors. They were talking about, I don't know what, laughing. And at some point, Stacy asked something about dinner, like what they had eaten, and Jessica mentioned it had been risotto. Then Stacy said, "Oh, how nice. Did you make it?" And that's when I heard Jessica laugh and say, No, Andrew doesn't cook at home. He cooks all day at the restaurant and comes home dead tired. So he definitely doesn't cook here." And Stacy laughed too and said something like, "Ah, well, at least he has a good excuse. My ex didn't cook either, and he didn't even work at a restaurant." I stood there upstairs completely frozen. Benjamin was already asleep, but Charlotte was still awake, and she asked me if I was okay, because I think I had a weird look on my face. I told her yes, everything was fine, and I put her to bed, but the truth is, I wasn't fine at all. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. Andrew doesn't cook at home? Really? I brought dinner to that house literally every weekday, 5 days a week, 52 weeks a year, except when we were on vacation, and she had just told her friend that I didn't cook. Technically, I guess it was true that I didn't cook in the house, in our kitchen, but I was cooking that food. I was preparing it with my own hands at the restaurant. Didn't that count? I stayed, awake, until Stacy left around midnight. I heard Jessica come up the stairs, walk into the bedroom, and start getting undressed to sleep like nothing happened. I was lying there in the dark and I said, "Hey, I need to talk to you about something." She said, "Now." "I'm tired." And I said, "Yes, now, because what you said downstairs bothered me." Jessica sighed like she was annoyed and said, "What did I say?" And I explained that I'd heard when she told Stacy that I didn't cook at home. Her response was, "Well, you don't." And I said, "Jessica, I bring dinner to this house every day. I cook that food. I prepare it." And she said, "Yes, but not here. It's not the same thing." I asked her how it wasn't the same thing. The food didn't magically appear. I was making it. And she basically shrugged and said it was different because I had to eat at work anyway, so it wasn't like I was making an extra effort just for us. That hurt even more, because it sounded like what I did had no value, like it didn't matter. I tried to explain to her that for me it was important, that I deliberately chose to make extra portions, that I thought about what she and the kids liked when I planned what to prepare, that I used better quality ingredients for my family's food than what we used for regular service, but she just kept saying I was overreacting, that it had just been a casual conversation with Stacy, and she didn't understand why I was making a drama out of this. She told me to go to sleep and ended the conversation there. I barely slept at all that night. And the next morning, Saturday, I tried to talk to her again during breakfast, but she maintained the same position, like I was being too sensitive and she hadn't said anything technically wrong. The kids were there, so I couldn't push the topic much, but inside I was furious and hurt at the same time. We spent the weekend in a weird tension, being polite in front of the kids but barely talking when we were alone. Monday I got home from work and, honestly, I'd been thinking all day about what to do. I had packed dinner for Benjamin and Charlotte, their favorite dishes, pasta with meatballs that they love, but I didn't bring anything for Jessica. I didn't even tell her. I got home, took out only 2 containers, gave the kids their dinner, and when Jessica asked where hers was, I told her very calmly that since according to her I didn't cook at home, I had assumed she'd prefer to prepare her own dinner. You should have seen her face. It went from confusion to anger in like 2 seconds. She asked me if I was serious, and I said, totally serious. If what I did didn't count as cooking or as an effort that deserved recognition, then I would simply stop doing it for her. The kids would continue getting their dinner because they appreciated the food and had never disrespected me about it, but she could manage on her own. Jessica just stood there in the kitchen staring at me like I'd lost my mind, then grabbed her purse, left the house and came back like half an hour later with food from a drive-thru. We didn't talk all night. This continued all week. Every night I brought dinner only for the kids and me, and Jessica either made something for herself or bought food outside. The tension in the house was horrible, like you could cut it with a knife. The kids didn't understand what was happening, but they felt something was wrong. Wednesday night, Benjamin, who's 8 and very perceptive, asked me why Mom wasn't eating with us, and I told him something vague about Mom wanting to eat other things. But he didn't seem very convinced. Thursday, Jessica tried to start a conversation about how this was ridiculous, and I was punishing her for something silly, but I held my ground. I told her it wasn't a punishment, just that I had decided to stop doing something that apparently had no value to her. She argued that she'd never said it had no value, just that technically, it wasn't cooking at home, and I told her that technical distinction had completely devalued what I contributed to our family. We ended up in uncomfortable silence again. Friday night, Benjamin finally asked directly, "Dad, why do you only bring food for us and not for Mom? Are you guys fighting?" That question broke my heart because I'd never wanted the kids to feel caught in the middle of our problems. I told him that Mom and I were working on something, but everything was going to be okay, though honestly I wasn't sure about that at the time. Saturday morning, Jessica came to me while I was making coffee and told me we had to resolve this, now that she couldn't keep going like this. I asked her if she was ready to acknowledge that she had minimized my contribution and to genuinely apologize, not just say sorry so things would go back to normal. She got frustrated and said she didn't understand why I was making this so difficult, that she had never intended to hurt me and she was sorry if I had felt bad, but that I was also exaggerating the situation by continuing this for a whole week. I told her it wasn't an exaggeration, that this was about respect and appreciation, and that if she couldn't see why what she'd said in front of Stacy had hurt me so much, then we had a bigger problem. That seemed to reach her somehow, because she went quiet for a moment, sat down in one of the kitchen chairs, and finally said, looking down, "Okay, I'm sorry. I'm really sorry. I shouldn't have said that, and I should have thought better about it. I should have defended you when Stacy asked, instead of making that comment." It was the first time I felt she really understood why I was upset. I asked her if she really meant it or if she was just tired of the situation, and she looked at me and said, "Both things are true. I'm tired of this, but I also genuinely regret making you feel like your effort doesn't matter, because it does matter a lot. Every night when you come home with dinner, it's a huge relief for me not to have to think about that, not to have to cook after a long day, and you're right that I never thank you enough for it. That was what I needed to hear. Not just an automatic sorry, but a real acknowledgement of what my actions meant for our family." I told her I appreciated the apology, and that I understood she had probably also felt attacked by me during the week, which hadn't been my intention. I just wanted her to understand how I felt. We hugged there in the kitchen and agreed that Sunday we'd all eat together as a family. Something she would cook for a change, just as a gesture that she understood the point. Monday I went back to bringing dinner for everyone, including Jessica. When I got home, she received me differently, gave me a kiss, and explicitly said, "Thank you for dinner," something that before was just taken for granted. The kids were happy that things were back to normal, and Benjamin specifically said he was glad that Mom and Dad weren't fighting anymore. I thought everything was resolved until like 2 weeks later, when Stacy came to visit again on a Saturday afternoon. I was home this time, outside fixing some things in the yard, and at some point, I went in to get water. I heard them in the living room talking, and Stacy mentioned something about men and cooking again, making another comment like, "Ha. Well, we know Andrew isn't exactly a chef at home, even though he works at a restaurant. Right, Jessica?" I froze, waiting to hear Jessica's response, and to my surprise and enormous relief, she said, "Actually, Stacy, that's not true. Andrew brings dinner home for us every weeknight. He cooks that food specifically thinking about us, and it's one of the most important ways he contributes to this family. So yes, he definitely cooks for us." There was silence, and then Stacy said something like, "Oh, I didn't know that. I thought you'd said he didn't cook." And Jessica responded, "I know. I also thought of it that way technically, but I was wrong to minimize it like that." I felt like an enormous weight had been lifted off my shoulders. I went back out to the yard with a smile on my face that probably looked ridiculous. That night after Stacy left, Jessica explained to me that she'd been thinking a lot about our fight and had realized that part of why she'd said what she originally said was because Stacy is always talking about her terrible ex and the problems she had, and Jessica felt like pressure to fit into that narrative of complaining about husbands. You know what I mean? Like that's what you're supposed to do on those girls' nights. Complain a little, laugh about your partners. But in doing so, she had betrayed something important between us. I told her I understood the social pressure and group dynamics, but that I was glad she had found a way to be honest with her friend about our reality. She smiled and told me that the following Wednesday, she was going to cook a special dinner for me, as a thank you. That it was going to be my night off from thinking about food. And she did. She made this oven-baked chicken with potatoes that she does really well, and the kids thought it was great that Mom was cooking dinner on a weekday, something rare for us. Since then, things have been different. Better, I'd say. Jessica makes a point of explicitly thanking me when I arrive with dinner. Not every day in an exaggerated way, but enough so that I know she recognizes the effort. The kids have also started doing it. Charlotte now gives me a hug when I arrive and says, "Thank you, Dad, for the food," which melts my heart every time. And I, for my part, try to recognize more the things Jessica does. The breakfast and lunch she prepares, the way she handles the logistics of the house and the kids, because I realized that I had probably also taken her contributions for granted for a long time. Last week, Benjamin asked me if when he grows up he could work with me at the restaurant to learn to cook like I do, and when I asked him why, he said he wanted to be able to cook for his family someday, like I do. That made me realize that our kids are watching and learning from these dynamics, from how we treat each other's work and contributions, and that we need to model not just the part of doing things for your family, but also the part of recognizing and appreciating what others do. I still work the same long shifts. I still come home tired every night, and I still bring dinner home 5 days a week. The difference now is that I feel like that action is seen and valued instead of being invisible or taken for granted. And that, honestly, is all I wanted from the beginning. I didn't need big gestures or constant recognition. I just needed to know that what I did mattered, that it counted as a real contribution to my family and wasn't just something technical or insignificant. Jessica and I have talked more deeply since then about how words matter, about how the way we talk about our partners, even in conversations we think are private or casual, reflects how we really see and value them. She admitted that there were probably other times when she had minimized my contributions without realizing it, and I admitted I had probably done the same with hers. We're trying to be more conscious now, to say things out loud instead of assuming the other knows we appreciate what they do. The whole situation taught me that marriages need more than just a division of tasks that works logistically. They need mutual recognition and respect for those tasks. You can be doing everything right in practical terms, but if your partner doesn't value or recognize that, eventually, it's going to cause resentment and problems. And I also learned that it's worth standing your ground when something really matters to you. Even if at first it seems like a silly or small fight, because often those small things represent bigger issues about respect and appreciation in the relationship. I'm not going to pretend everything is perfect now, or that we'll never have another disagreement about who does what or how we value each other's contributions. But I feel like we're in a much better place, more aware, more communicative, and more intentional about recognizing each other's efforts. And that, for me, is worth more than any dinner I could prepare, no matter how perfectly it comes out of the oven.